Are you waiting for the right time to buy property? Then it's best you watch this, because right now there are two things I've noticed over this last year that tell me if you don't buy now, you might live to regret it. Now look, I could be wrong, but I've spent my life building a UK-wide home buying company, British Home Buyers, a nationwide estate agency, British Home Sellers, and my own personal property portfolio. So not only does that give me access to information you probably don't have, but getting this right is critical to mine and my client's success. Let's get into it. Number one, prices have actually already crashed silently. I know if you look at average house prices, since time began, house prices have gone up and up and up, and every property guru under the sun will point at this table. And even if you zoom just to the last few years, house prices have stayed relatively flat, increasing slightly overall. But what none of this takes into consideration is inflation. I know, we all know what inflation is, in the same way we all know how compounding works. But like compounding, inflation is not intuitive to how our minds work. We're all used to having things having a fixed direction. 1 + 1 = 2. But the moment we then have to build in the logic of inflation, the fact that £1 today is actually worth less than £1 a year ago, it becomes hard for us to accurately understand value. Because if house prices have stayed level, but inflation has been high, well, that actually means house prices have been dropping in reality, yet that's not really what's on the headlines. So here you can see house prices relative to inflation over the last 30 years. And you can see the giant drop on the left representing the 1990s housing crash. Interesting how now if you look back at average house prices over the last 35 years, that massive drop in house prices relative to inflation just looks like a relatively flat line on the graph, dropping a little but not by much. Very similar to the situation we have now, with house prices staying flat. In reality, are they? If we go back to the UK house prices adjusted for inflation, we can see how it grew hugely, leading towards the 2007 financial crash, and it actually never recovered to those same peaks in 2007. The important thing to look at now is the last 3 years. Just look at house prices adjusted for inflation over the last 3 years. They have dropped almost 16%, and now it looks like they're flatlining. This shows the percentage change in house prices over the last 3 years. The blue line shows house prices relative to inflation. The yellow line shows it not adjusted to inflation. And you can see here visually what a massive difference inflation makes to the reality of these percentage drops. But importantly, take a look at how that blue line bottomed out over the first half of 2023, and it's now starting to rise. The annual percentage drop in house prices has been recovering for some time now and is starting to get closer to that 0%. Remember, this recovery has already started happening, even with interest rates at a peak right now. So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think will start to happen when interest rates drop even slightly later this year? Number two, interest rates will decrease slightly. The Bank of England and Andrew Bailey is never going to categorically say interest rates will drop. But in reality, and I'm quoting Mr. Bailey now, that it is likely that we will need to cut bank rates over the coming quarters. So look, in reality, the market is expecting interest rates to drop, although the election is expected to delay any interest rate drops on the basis that the Bank of England has actually never reduced interest rates the month after an election since it was made independent in 1997. That's why mortgage rates have gone up slightly. So when interest rates drop, what happens? Money supply increases. The graph shows the money supply in the UK economy. Interesting how the shape of it is almost exactly the same as UK average house prices. Look, in reality, interest rates isn't the only thing that affects money supply, but in general, increasing interest rates drops the money supply. So in theory, that helps drive inflation down in general. But now, as a percentage, the annual growth in the amount of money in the economy actually turned to negative for the first time since 2010. All of this has been dampening house price growth significantly. The moment you start dropping interest rates, even just by a little, you are beginning to increase the supply of money being used to spend on property in the property market in general. In a property market where house prices relative to inflation are already starting to rebound. You pair this with inflation dropping, we could easily find ourselves in a situation where inflation is on target, but where house prices begin to increase 2, 3, 4, even 5% or more, without the element of inflation that has been silently dropping house prices 16% over the last few years. What do you think to all of this? Do you think I'm right or wrong? Like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more of me, and I'll see you in my next video up here.